Hi, and welcome to BNEWS InDepth. I'm your host, Sydney Bowles. One of the biggest stories in Burlington right now is the effort to replace the aging Fox Hill Elementary School. The town originally approached the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or the MSBA, about replacing just Fox Hill, but the MSBA has asked the town to also consider another option, combining Fox Hill and Pine Glen Elementary School into a larger building on the Fox Hill site. It's an option that could cost more in the short term, but could save the town the extra cost of rehabilitating Pine Glen later on. It could also mean losing the four-school model many in town feel strongly about, although in one option, Burlington could see two separate schools on the same site, sharing some resources while maintaining separate identities. The decision is weighty enough that the school building committee plans to request a town-wide vote to gather the will of the people. To understand the full scope of the decision, I sat down with two people at the heart of the project. Melissa Massardo is a school committee member and the chair of the Elementary School Building Committee, which is in charge of the Fox Hill project. And Donna DiNisco is the president and principal at DiNisco Designs, the design firm that will develop the final project. Let's dig in. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sydney Bowles here with Melissa Massardo and Donna DiNisco. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, before we begin, I want to play a little bit from a recent school committee meeting because I feel like this has been a little tense and I want to just get a flavor for what that feels like and what the communication has felt like. So I'm going to turn to Robert in the control room and maybe we can get that clip going.
There's been a lot of contention around the project and people have very real concerns. I want to point out that I think we all are on the same side when it comes to being excited about having this opportunity to build a new elementary school for our children, regardless of whatever the outcome is of the choices that we make. And I hope that we, although I feel sometimes we've been off to a rough start, that we are aiming for transparency. We are trying to consider all the options, trying to hear everyone's voices, and I hope that we can move forward in a positive way to end up with a building and a program that's good for the students of Burlington.
So that was, of course, committee member Martha Simon, and I think you can hear both a little bit of tension, but also a real commitment to working together, to working with the community. So I guess I just want to start with, Melissa, you're a parent, a community member, a Fox Hill parent. This is a lot. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, I've been on the school committee now for barely a year and a half. So I feel like I have dove in feet first and really, I think I spent a lot of time trying to understand the process because it is a confusing process. There's a lot of acronyms that I still am not even positive that I get. I'm really just trying to understand what our options are, really follow the process that's been outlined. I'm excited. I know I've been a resident of Burlington for almost 10 years now, and I think we've been asking the MSBA for money every single one of those years. And so now that we have been approved to be an MSBA partner, I'm really excited and I want to work with them. And I want to get the best school, just like Martha said, I want to get the best school that we possibly can for the students and families in Burlington.
Do you think I'm off base to characterize it as a little tense sometimes?
I think there's been some misinformation floating around, and I think that there's folks that maybe haven't been paying attention or didn't realize that it might affect them. So I think there's definitely been some contention. I think we're trying really, really hard to make sure that absolutely everyone in town knows this is going on, understands all of the facts, and understands what's happening. I think the biggest thing to say is that no decision has been made, and I think that that's where the contention has come from, that there's a predetermined outcome here. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have is that we are still literally digging into what our options are, where what the future could look like for each of those options, and really trying to understand what our choices are before we make a decision, which will be later this year. And so hopefully I think we had a really good community meeting just a couple weeks ago, and I'm really hopeful some more people really understand what's going on now, and I think maybe the tension can ease a little bit.
Yeah. I want to get into that place that we're in now, where we have some months to sort of home in on what we're going to try and go forward with. But I want to take this opportunity too, Donna, to introduce you to the community a little bit more. Your firm is the designers on this project. So for those who may not know, what does that mean? What does your firm do, and why are you the right person to be helping us in this project?
Oh, thank you. So DiNisco Design, we have been designing educational facilities for over 45 years. Not me personally at the helm for all 45 years, but yep. So we specialize in public schools, K through 12, public K through 12 schools. We have seen all kinds of solutions to a very similar problem that Burlington has, right? And so for us, it's really important that we understand what the priorities are for a community. It could be anything from a cost, it could be from a size, it could be making sure that the building maintains a certain feel, a certain character. And most importantly, we're really good listeners. We do not come to any project with any preconceived solutions or ideas or notions. It's our job to listen, which is what we're doing right now, and we'll help you arrive at the right solution. So our job is to make sure that you have all of the information you need to make an informed decision.
What have you been learning about Burlington and what our priorities are?
Burlington is very passionate, which is wonderful. It's great. And it's great to be hearing the voices now. We don't want to hear the voices after a solution has been arrived at, right? We are hearing that education is really important. Small class size is really important. And Burlington has a commitment to provide the support to educate the entire student, which goes beyond the teacher in the general classroom, right? And so I'm learning a lot, and I just am honored to be here in a community that really supports the whole student.
Melissa, why are we doing this? What does Fox Hill need? Why is Fox Hill the school?
Sure.
Why not Pine Glen, which is older?
So I was not on the committee when we decided to do Fox Hill over Pine Glen. I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, we did receive a study of all the schools in Burlington that identified the high school actually as the most in need of repair, renovation, rebuild.
Which we are starting the
process. Yep, town meeting has approved the feasibility study there. So for many, many years, we asked the state to help us build a new high school because, again, that was identified as the top priority. There's some serious HVAC needs at the high school, and over half the classrooms have no windows. So after, I think it was 9 or 10, too many years of asking the state, we help us build a high school. We said, I don't think we're going to get the money from the state on the high school. Let's take a next track. And we went with Fox Hill. I know one of the large things that's an issue with Fox Hill is the layout. You've heard Donna talk about the snowflake. It's 4 pods. Mm-hmm. It's not laid out well for an elementary school. We have, 4th grade with 1st grade. It's easy. I can get lost in that building. You can really tell which pod you're in. Mm-hmm. We ran out of space probably 20 years ago. So there's a number of, and Donna has a great couple slides of the deficiencies of Fox Hill. And we were obviously correct in that assumption, and MSBA approved us in the first submission with Fox Hill. So regardless of the outcome here, we're going to get hopefully the town will support a new Fox Hill building that will provide, the 21st century educational needs to meet the 21st century educational needs of our students.
So, if I'm hearing correctly, the reason that we're maybe doing Fox Hill, or that we didn't apply for Pine Glen as itself, is that even though Pine Glen is a couple years older, Fox Hill has this weird snowflake model that's not really in line with our educational needs.
Correct.
But Pine Glen's also old, and so the MSBA is like, what if we take a look at some other options.
Correct. The MSBA came to us and said, you know what, here's an opportunity for you. We will address both of your 1960s buildings that are at the end of life, and we'll build a school for 640 students that will take care of the enrollment of both Fox Hill and Pine Glen, and they will provide their share for that building.
So our partner here is the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Correct.
Donna, this is a state agency. For a lot of folks, I think maybe myself included, it's a little bit of a black box. It's our partner in this, but there's a lot that we don't know, that we don't hear from them very often. Can you tell us a little bit about this agency's quirks, maybe its desires, its intentions? What's their deal?
So their predecessor was the School Building Assistance Program.
Okay.
So the state has had a commitment to update school facilities for years, I think since the 1970s. The way they paid for it was when the state had extra money, they would then give a community part of that money. But what was happening was communities were having to fund the whole project until such time the state had some money to give them. So it could take 20, 30 years. You've already bonded, you've already paid. So finally, the legislature came in and said, you know, we need to change this. So what they did was they get 1 cent of the local or for the state tax that gets applied to or gets put into the MSBA budget or pocket. So they've developed, they're really a state funding agency is what they are. However, they have taken a really good look at what's important. They want equity. It doesn't matter if you're in a gateway community or in a very elite community, they wanted equity across. So they really were focused on making sure that your educational program was the first primary objective. And once you understand what the ed program...
The educational program is, just to clarify, that's sort of like, here's the things that we're going to teach. Therefore, the spaces that we have need to set us up to achieve that. Is that about
correct?
Right?
Correct. So and again, it goes beyond just your general classroom, but it does go into how many students do you have in a classroom. That will determine how many classrooms. What are your special education needs? What other supports do you need? Every student receives other supports beyond the general classroom, right? Your art, your music, your specials, reading,
and
math
all of that
help.
Goes into the educational
all
program.
of this goes into the educational program. So the educational program defines your space needs, which then define the size of the building, right? But MSBA wanted to make sure that it's equitable across every community. So they have set up guidelines and they've also set up limits. So if a community wants a very large field house, as an example, for their elementary school, or they want a auditorium in an elementary school, they feel that a cafetorium, which is a cafeteria with a stage, is appropriate for an elementary school performance. So they won't pay for that.
Okay.
At one point, they said they weren't even going to allow it. But
Okay.
now they're saying anything above and beyond what we feel is appropriate for this grade level, if it's an elementary school. So they have determined pretty much the size, the square footage, based on your educational program, and then what they will support from a financial perspective.
And so this is tricky, and I know that we could get so deep into the weeds here, and we're not gonna. But to tiptoe into the weeds, to put a little toe into the weeds, there are something like 49% of some costs are reimbursable now that we've been accepted to the program, and that varies. If we want to go over on X, we have to pay for that ourselves. They're not going to cover the moving expenses, they're not going to cover Y, but some things are coverable. So now you guys are in the process, and correct me if I'm wrong, of sort of figuring out, or have maybe done this, depending on what kind of building we want to build, here's what 49% of that would look like. They'll cover 15% of this piece, or whatever that might be. Is that kind of what the calculation looks like?
Yeah. So
maybe.
Yes, no,
Maybe
you're right, and it's very. I know Mike Burton, who is with the owner project manager, Dawn Whittier, who's also a partner in the project. has tried to walk everyone through it simply. MSBA will pay X dollars per square foot that are eligible. So if you build a field house or auditorium, they won't participate in that. They recognize that the cost or the cost per square foot doesn't even cover today's construction market. They acknowledge it, but they're trying to help as many communities as possible. And then they have other caps on their costs, such as site. Things that they won't reimburse for would be moving, mailings, administrative, legal, so, but because their focus is to put as much money into the educational program that directly affects and impacts the students. So it's a formula. They really determine the outcome, but this 49% that you were alluding to, every district or community has what they call a base reimbursement rate, and it's based upon your poverty level and some other factors that's just your fixed rate, and then from there.
Right. Okay. So Melissa, there is a fair amount that they won't cover or that we still have to pay for, and we can get more into that a little bit later in the conversation. But what does it feel like to think about all of these things that maybe they won't cover, maybe they will, all of these expenses that we're going to have? How do you balance that as someone who's looking out for the community on the school building committee?
Sure, I think that's the dilemma that's the hardest part right now, and I think that's we mentioned at the beginning, the contention, right? I think there's definitely desire in the town to keep the floor school model, and I completely understand that, but that's the most expensive option that we have right now. We would have to build a new Fox Hill and then a new Pine Glen with completely our own money, because the state is providing us the opportunity to rebuild Pine Glen as part of a combined school, so they will not pay for us to rebuild Pine Glen separately. So we have that option, the town can do it. It's also the most expensive. And so the combined school definitely will save us money and we'll receive more reimbursement from the MSBA. So I'm really just trying to understand the appetite in the town, what amount of money we have to be able to spend on these school projects, to make sure that all the elementary school students in the town are receiving a 21st century building. And we talked about the high school too, like that project is at the top of my mind. So I'm really struggling with how we're going to pay for 2 or 3 school buildings in the next 5 to 10 years. But I have very young kids, and I know there's a lot of young families out here that want us to continue to have great schools, and I certainly have that goal. So we need to figure out how to pay, and I know there's some willingness. We're going to have to pay something for some of this. It's just I forgot to water my money tree.
Relatable. So let's talk about the options. We had to look at, because of the MSBA's regulations, we were required to do full due diligence and look at, I think, eight different models. Some of them on their face are just not reasonable. It's just not realistic, but we still had to give them a fair shot. So we nixed a couple of them. One of the ones that we nixed right away was like, we're just going to upgrade the existing Fox Hill a little bit.
We haven't nixed any.
Okay, forgive me. But it seems like, I think it's fair to say that that's not really a realistic option. We still have to look into it. That kind of a vibe, right, is like, we can all kind of agree that this is not the best path. We still need to give it a fair shot. Is that about right?
So we've done that due diligence, and that's what we just submitted in July. So our next school building committee is August 1st, and that's exactly where we can start to eliminate some of those options.
Okay. Donna, can you give us a brief rundown of what the spectrum of options are? I know this is a lot. You've done these.
I'll try to keep it high level because we could spend a lot of time here.
I'll do the fingers, right?
So MSBA, making sure that everyone doesn't jump to conclusions. They want you to really evaluate all ranges. It goes from a repair only, maintaining your existing school, and just upgrading it, right? It's at its end of its useful life. You have to really repair it and bring it up to code, accessibility and building code. you then weigh that against your educational program. And MSBA is saying that this model, per the space summary, it doesn't even meet to the current enrollment, and it doesn't even meet the lower enrollment. So we have two options we have to look at. So maybe I'll just take a quick step back.
Sure.
We have two enrollment options. One has 325 students and one has 640 students. 325 would address not all of the current Fox Hill School, because that has 438 students in it, right? So, or the combined would be Pine Glen and Fox Hill schools for 640 students. So they want us to look at a base repair option, and 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work for any community, but it gives you an idea of what the cost would be if you did nothing, right? So at minimum, you would have to invest, and I didn't bring all the numbers with me today, but you would have to invest X just to maintain the building. Mm-hmm. Do not improve the educational aspects at all. But that's sort of a good benchmark as you start looking at the other options, more than anything else, right? Then we have to look at an addition renovation, which does happen, and we can do it very successfully.
We did that at our middle school.
At the middle school,
yeah.
Right. So, but it's fair to say that the snowflake model is very challenging to be able to do it in a meaningful way to provide the best spatial relationships, adjacencies, and an educational program for the students. And then there's a new school option. And we are really seriously looking at it, but we have to also make sure that we can do it at either Pine Glen or Fox Hill, get into that in a sec, in a way that doesn't completely disrupt your current schools, because you have no alternative site to build, and these students have to remain on the site. Right. So you take that for 325 students, and then you have to also evaluate it for 640 students. So it goes from about a 90,000 square foot building to a 155,000 square foot building. And because we're looking at 2 schools, we then have to look at Pine Glen for a renovation, addition, and for new construction.
So that would be, if we say we're gonna rebuild Fox Hill, then we also need to be looking at rebuilding Pine Glen. What would that cost? What are those options there? Are we setting us up for failure down the road? Am I understanding correctly?
You're saying independent of the 8 options?
Right.
Well, so if the solution here today, or for this project with MSBA, is 325 students, Fox Hill only, it's a fair question to ask, okay, well, what are we going to do with Pine Glen? How are we going to address the needs of Pine Glen? MSBA recognizes you have a need, right? The town recognizes you have a need. So if the solution, if it doesn't make sense that you include Pine Glen as part of this project and this solution, what are our options for that, right? So we've done a renovation addition, so you have an idea of what the cost might be there, but more importantly is, what would a new Pine Glen school be for approximately 325 students? What would it look like, and what would those costs be? So that you have an informed decision. If you just do Fox Hill for this project, anticipate X cost when you do Pine Glen, right?
Okay. So I think, Melissa, one of the projects that's gotten a lot of attention is this idea of 640 students on the current Fox Hill site. And there are a couple of options for that. One is one big school, and I think that's kind of what the MSBA was imagining. But there's also what's been called the butterfly model that's been discussed in these different meetings. And for those who are not familiar, that would basically be Pine Glen and Fox Hill would retain separate classroom spaces, separate administration, separate school identities, but they'd share some resources like the cafetorium, is that right? And some other sort of like combined stuff, and sort of have this butterfly appearance, essentially. How did we arrive at that as one of these sort of buzzwords of this? What's the story of that as an option?
Sure. So at the very beginning, looking at 640 student schools, to back up a teeny bit, the very first role of the school building committee is to choose the partners, right? So we had to choose an owner's project manager and a designer. And we go through a very extensive RFP process for that. But we chose Dorn Whittier and DiNisco, who have worked together, ironically, in a bunch of other projects. And when you do this, you get a nice, beautifully bound book with pictures and descriptions of all their other schools. And they, together, I believe, they did the Mariah Hastings School in Lexington and the Bancroft School in Andover, which I think our selection committee both really felt like these are exactly the type of schools that we wanted to build. You know, the look and feel, the nice glossy pages, the pictures of the inside, and the educational program. And we also, I think, felt like Lexington and Andover were nice comparative districts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you didn't do Andover. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But
We've done
whoever
others
did it,
together.
yeah,
Live fact checking.
yeah.
It's okay.
But
That's
so
okay.
those are both roughly 640 student schools all together. So I think at the very beginning of exploring 640, we just looked at those. But again, we got the feedback from the town that they're this 4-school model, that folks really felt attached to smaller schools and the identities. Fox Hill has the Be the One, Pine Glen has Hoot of the Week. Like there's definite, and you know, I'm a proud Fox Hill parent, and there's plenty of proud Pine Glen parents. So
And alumni.
and
A lot of
alumni,
proud alumni, yeah.
absolutely. And so many parents that are
Yeah,
alumni. It's kind
yeah,
of crazy. So we heard that feedback, and I said to myself as a parent, like, okay, how do we achieve that in this 640 student school? And like Donna said, she's a great listener. I was like, well, you could still have that in this larger school. We just combine 2 smaller schools. And I felt like it was a really nice compromise. You retain both principals, you retain that culture, the separate PTOs, all of that stuff. We toured one, and they have blue linoleum on one side of the building and green linoleum on one side of the building, so you know exactly which school you're in at which time. There's a wall in the cafeteria so that you don't even really cross paths with the students from the other side. And I think it was Martha Simon gets the credit for coining the butterfly school, but it felt like a nice compromise to retain the 2 identities and some of the small school feel that we heard was important to parents.
Forgive me. There was a gentleman who spoke at a recent meeting about this, and I'm gonna paraphrase what he was saying, but I think it's a fairly widespread perception. So maybe you can, I don't know, counter this or comment on it. He was essentially saying, nice try, but that's not what we mean. We want 4 schools on 4 sites. It's not the same to have 2 schools on one site. I'm paraphrasing.
No, I mean,
but
it's not the same. It's absolutely not the same. And I know there's some walkers to Pine Glen that would lose out in that scenario. And again, I'm happy to support that. It's really, do we have the willingness to spend for two new schools is the question that I have. And I don't know. And that's what we're still trying to understand. Where the next couple of months we're working to kind of further refine what that combined school could look like. And I think maybe as more people see it, you know, we'll get more feedback and we'll understand a little bit more what the willingness to spend for 2. If the desire is there and the willingness to pay for 2 brand new schools is there, then I'm positive the school building committee is happy to support that. So I think that's where we're looking at the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, I think the elephant in the room is getting funding for this on our end because, Donna, maybe you can clarify the process on this. We've talked about this a little offline, and I'm like, oh no, if I try to explain it, I'm going to get it wrong. But there's pieces, right? We have to go to town meeting and get approval to bond this, and then maybe get a debt exclusion also.
Correct.
So can you give me explain like I'm 5 on what that structure looks like?
Sure. So the town governing body, right, which is your town meeting, needs to vote to approve, and it has to be a 2/3 vote majority, not simple majority, a 2/3 vote, to vote to bond and pay for the school, right? If the intent is to not do it within your current levy, not do it within the 2.5%, but to actually increase taxes on it. Then you would have a debt exclusion, which it's a referendum, and you would have to put a vote out as an election per se to the entire community, all 17,000 voters, to vote to support that they will pay additive to above and beyond their current taxes just for this project. So it would be for a determined amount of time, a determined value every year, and it would be bonded for 20, 25, 30 years. It varies per district.
Basically, we need to take out a mortgage for the school.
For the school.
So essentially, and as always, correct me if I'm wrong, the school building committee is going to settle on which of these options they're going to want to take to the voters. They need to get 2/3 of town meeting, and then probably also go to the voters.
Yep. And that's a simple majority for
Okay.
the.
So to back up, what's going to happen is by the end of 2023, the school building committee is going to choose a preferred design. So one specific one that we will move forward. But what we will then spend almost all of next year refining that, getting a specific dollar amount, and then not until September of 2024 will we go to town meeting to vote 2/3 to support that number.
Is there a fear that town meeting says no?
Absolutely. And if town meeting says no, we get no school. You don't go back and say, okay, never mind, we'll take choice B. We get none. And we have to get back in line with MSBA. That's my real biggest concern. You basically start all over again with MSBA and hope that they pick you up again and start. So 3 to 5 years, I would guess, of a delay in the process.
So how do you reckon with that? Do you start from we have to choose a model that we know town meeting will support, or do you say we're going to choose the model that we believe is best for our students and we're going to do the work to help town meeting understand why, or is it something else?
I think it's all of the above. I'm very confident that Donna will design a building that will work for our students. We submitted an 800-page educational program.
A lot of
Dr.
pages.
Conti, Mr. Rosenblatt, Mr. Lyons, all the administrators worked so hard on that program. And I've read not all 800 pages, but a lot of it. And it's very strong. I mean, we have huge special ed supports. We have the lab program at Fox Hill. We have the DSC, developmental skills program for autistic students at Pine Glen. We have huge, like Donna mentioned, special ed programs in our schools. And that's all outlined. I'm trying to think, we have like the one specific one, like the art program uses a kiln. So there's room in the building for a kiln. OT, huge, beautiful OT and PT spaces in these buildings. So I don't know if it's a matter of convincing folks that we need new schools. I'm hopeful that people understand that these buildings where we're making broom closets into offices are no longer acceptable for our students to be in there. The students are getting services in the hallways. Fox Hill dead-ended a hallway to like literally close off and make an office. Like we need Pine Glen and Fox Hill need to be replaced. So I'm confident that Donna will design whichever enrollment that Donna will design appropriate educational building. And Dr. Conti, Mr. Rosenblatt, and Mr. Lyons have assured me that whichever we choose, they promise, and I'm confident that they will provide an appropriate educational program. So I'm confident that either way, we're providing the best education for our students. So I would love to convince the town meeting to build us many, many buildings. So I think it's definitely going to be a combination of both, but I need to figure out how to choose the right one.
But I think to add to that, again, just being good listeners and understanding all aspects and all concerns of it. So we have a community meeting coming up in September, wanting to hear more from people, giving an opportunity for everyone to come. It's going to be in person with a microphone. You can get up, you can speak. It's more about listening than us presenting at that point. We want to go before town meeting and make sure, that they understand the cost implications of both options. also taking into consideration the high school and what the capacity is of the town. So it's making sure everyone has all the information, but we really want to be confident that whatever preferred solution is selected by late, like November, December, will be supported. Because what's the point if we don't get full support?
How common is it? You work with other communities. How common is it for a town to go through this process and then have it nixed partway through?
Fortunately, we have not had that happen, but I shouldn't say many, several communities have done that. They have either not listened or did not engage enough to hear what would be or wouldn't be supported. And I think some have gone back 2 and 3 times, and actually MSBA has been supportive, and they've actually been able to do that. We have one community we're working with. They put a vote out in 2015. It failed. They got back into the MSBA pipeline. And we're working with them now. We did get a successful vote, and they won't have a new school until 2026, and the cost has doubled.
It's multiple generations of students. Huge cost increase.
Huge costs.
Yeah, the stakes are high.
Yep.
The stakes are high. And then I believe there's also a speed component of this, because the timeline from when we submit our preferred schematic and when we have to go to town meeting and get this vote happening, it's something like, is it 120 days, is that right?
So our preferred schematic report or study or PSR, you'll be saying that
to my brain,
is due at the end of the year, and that is just to pick the preferred solution, right? The most cost-effective and educationally appropriate solution, right? And then we submit that. Then MSBA votes on that and says, yep, we agree with you, go. So then we do what's called schematic design. And we lay out the building a little more, we get more information, we refine the design, we get a cost, we come into agreement with MSBA how much they're gonna share from a cost perspective, and then what the town share is. At that point is when we would be going to the voters to seek their approval. But we could go to a debt exclusion even before we have MSBA's support, or even town meeting support, or you could do town meeting first and then you do the debt exclusion. So there are many ways of looking at when we do that, but we're looking at that probably in end of the summer of 24 or the fall of 24, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So we got to pick right and we got to pick fast.
Yeah, I don't know fast. Like we've been talking about this, but
I mean,
yeah,
it does
so
seem like it's
up.
fast. I said 6 months the other day. Donna's like, no, it's 4 months.
It's 4 months.
And I said, okay.
Yeah, because
so,
we're already in August.
It's
right?
gonna come up. I mean, the
It
fall
is
will go
fast.
by quick.
Yeah.
There have been some concerns about the way that this has happened. Melissa, I want to ask kind of a difficult question, and this is going to put you a little bit on the spot. I think there have been some concerns about transparency. We've been talking about the value of listening, but in my listening to the community, I've heard some concerns. I think Ways and Means Committee Chair John Eiler raised concerns about subcommittee or working group meetings not being publicized appropriately. Community members from Pine Glen, notably Amanda Hannafin, were sort of concerned that Pine Glen was not adequately involved. Those are real concerns. I wonder how you've been hearing those, what your response has been, if you think they're off base, how you perceive that transparency component.
Sure. I mean, the Pine Glen choice is a great example of the rock and the hard place. I think we toyed with adding Pine Glen representation early on, and folks were like, well, this is going to look like it's a done deal that we're definitely combining with Pine Glen. So we kind of tried to hold off on that, but at some point we were, Amanda was like, well, we should still get a say. And we have Mr. Lyons, Amanda, and Ms. Hanfin and Ms. Gilberg are now representing Pine Glen, and Mrs. Bunker is a parent. So I'm wide open to how we can communicate this better. I think for the last community meeting, we did the code red, the reverse 911 phone call. So trying to reach everyone that we can. I mean, I was a parent before any of this happened, and I lived in Fox Hill, and I don't think I knew that we submitted Fox Hill to MSBA, right? So I understand that parents with young kids don't have a view into what's going on. I think everything's posted on the website, but did everyone get access, know that the website existed? It's hard in this town. I think we did the select board did a communication survey. Like, I'd love to reach more people. I want to reach as many people as possible. I think getting the legs of the school building committee was difficult. And I think, again, the rumor that we had decided a year ago, no decisions have been made. So I promise I'm trying as hard as I can. Yeah.
But it does involve the whole community.
100%.
It's not just, even if we do decide we're just going to rebuild Fox Hill,
Yep.
there's going to be redistricting. There's
Yes.
going to be tax implications for
Yep.
everybody, right? So
Yep.
what is that, how do you, I mean, you can't just talk to Fox Hill.
Correct, and I think, well, we renamed the building committee in itself. It was called the MSBA gave us the name as Fox Hill School Building Committee, but we've renamed it the Burlington Elementary School Building Committee to, admit to the fact that this is affecting all Burlington elementary schools. So, like you said, there's redistricting no matter what choice we make. There's redistricting. What choice we do make will have implications at the high school level, which every student goes to, right? Everybody that lives here is going to have to pay for it. So I think transparency has been an issue in and of that we need to get people to pay attention. They see Fox Hill and like, oh, my kid goes to Francis Wyman, never mind. Or, oh, it's an elementary school, my kids are in college, etc. So I think we appreciate your help in making sure everyone understands that this is the whole town is going to be impacted. And our website, can you post it at the bottom or something?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, because there's a contact us button there, and if you think of somebody out there thinks of a better way to reach more people, I'm all ears. I think that the reverse 911 phone call was the best idea that I could have, but we are discussing maybe mailings and stuff like that.
Subscribe to the BCAT newsletter.
Oh, there you go.
Hey. So there's so much more here. We didn't touch on concerns about traffic. We haven't touched about concerns about a loss of maybe educational that maybe a bigger school would have a worse educational outcome. Those are concerns that the community has. We don't have time to get too far into it, but I do think it's worth touching on those. Maybe, Donna, how do you, I know there's so much here. I'm so sorry to do this to you. I guess just broadly, how do you hear those concerns? And I think I would say traffic and concerns about educational outcomes at a larger school are probably the two big buckets.
Right.
How do you take those in? How have you been hearing those? And how do you respond to those going forward?
So our goal, we've heard the traffic concerns. We've witnessed the traffic concerns. Even Melissa and others are trying to address them currently because they exist now, right? So
And there are some plans in the works to like repaint and add some signage. Is that right?
in the neighborhood.
Yes, we
yeah,
got
in Fox Hill.
signs and repainting, and I'm meeting with Mr. Rosenblatt next week to talk about what we're going to do in the fall. So,
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
Sidewalks,
traffic,
neighborhood,
traffic
neighborhood,
is an
it's
issue
real.
now, and it doesn't change. And New School will actually help address some of the traffic.
So our goal for either option, 325 or 640 students, is we're confident that we can improve what currently exists today, right? All right, if you go with the 640 student school, you will have more traffic. Like I'm not going to tell you something that isn't, but you're not going to have the congestion that currently occurs, right? And the safety issues. So we will be able to accommodate all of the parent drop-off, all the buses. There won't be queuing down the streets, and we understand those are real concerns. There will be additional staff and parents driving, not double. Everyone keeps saying double, but not double. Like 40% more, but it's real, right? But if it can be managed on site, the current issues that are occurring within the neighborhoods hopefully will be improved or alleviated. the larger schools that have a negative impact on learning, I think was the other one, right?
I think at some of the meetings, residents expressed some concern that there's a loss of community feel, and a loss of the community feel means that educational outcomes could be worse if there's 640 kids in a school.
So again, designing a school that creates this intimate setting is really important, and we hear how important it is for the town of Burlington. And this butterfly option of having two completely independent schools, completely independent. You have different entrances. You maintain your small school. In fact, if it's 325 students, it's smaller than what you currently have, right? But so the outcome shouldn't be any different because we're not increasing the size of the student population in your school. The only real, every space, the cafetorium, you'll have two separate dining areas with an acoustic wall. That's it. So even your dining experiences will be small and intimate, just like you have today.
Separate playgrounds.
Separate playgrounds. Two independent areas of the gym that you will have two different gym teachers teaching simultaneously. The library has enough area that you can have two classes in there simultaneously. So there is no large school in any option that we're showing. That's a possibility. We've done it. We just completed a school, Mariah Hastings in Lexington, 645 students. I haven't heard that has impacted their outcome, right? Their educational outcome. But here, more importantly, is that we're hearing two small schools, so there is no large school. It's going to be a big facility. Can't dispute that, but it will maintain two small schools. But if that's not the desire, that's okay too. But we just want to make sure everyone has the correct information when they're making their decisions.
Right. We're gonna wrap up in the next couple of minutes. Are there any other, Melissa, rumors you want to dispel, messages you want to make sure you get out while we have this last few minutes?
I think we didn't touch fully on the enrollment numbers. So I think if you do the math, Fox Hill has 438 and Pine Glen has 320. That's more than 640, right? So that's where I think folks are saying, like, are we going to overload this school? So redistricting is going to have to happen in either scenario, right? 100 plus students will need to move out of Fox Hill if we build the 325 student one, and then still 100 something students will not be able to go to the Fox Hill Pine Glen. But I'm confident that we have room for those students. We're not going to overload Francis Wyman or Memorial under that circumstance. I believe I should have come more fully prepared, but I believe we have 1,607 elementary students going into this fall. And then the opening day of this will be in 2028, and that we are projected to have 1,590, so that 92. So that's a loss of only 15 students, and we are currently losing students. So I don't think any of our schools will be quote unquote overcrowded. We have room for 18 students in a class, which is a fantastic number across the entire district when this school opens. I know there has been some concern that enrollment is going up. It hasn't been identified as of today. Our enrollment is going down very slowly. But in some of the different options, we will have more or less ability to adjust to if enrollment does go up in the future. There's different options that is on our minds when we're making these decisions.
Okay. Donna, any other things you want to add before we wrap?
No. I think no. I mean, this has really been an engaged community, and I think the outcome will be better and enriched because of it. And we really want to hear all of the feedback. It makes just for a better solution. And I do just want to say that working with the school building committee, Dr. Conti and his team, it's been wonderful, and everyone really wants to do the right thing. And I think Dr. Conti says, I just rent here, I don't live here. So whatever really the community feels is the right solution, that's fine. We just want to make sure that everyone understands what the full impact of that is, right? And that they're able to make an informed decision. And you'll have an amazing outcome either way.
Melissa, my final question. What is the dream 20 years from now? This is done, it's in the past. What do we have? What's the outcome? What's the golden?
Yeah, and I really just want the appropriate spaces for our kids to for us to be able to provide services for our students in the appropriate space, for there to be, not worrying about HVAC issues, for us to our kids to be able to go and learn in the appropriate spaces, have enough space for them. And a new high school would be really, really nice too.
Melissa Massardo, chair of the Elementary School Building Committee, Donna DiNisco, principal and president of DiNisco Designs. Thank you both very, very much for your time.
Thank
you.
And thanks to you for watching. The decision facing Burlington is a significant one, and many people have different perspectives. So over the next few months, BNEWS will be speaking with more stakeholders to help you understand the issue more fully. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.